Kids, unless they are curious, unless they love learning, we've got a battle on our hands. And if we want children to come to school with a smile on their dial and they are happy and enthusiastic about coming into our classrooms, half our battle is won. But if you've got children who stand at that door and do not want to step over that threshold, that are bawling their eyes out in the mornings, or kids that are just not interested, they're not enthusiastic about learning, we have to get through to them. We have to find a way to get them curious. Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, a podcast that's all about nurturing that natural curiosity in our early years kids and students. I'm Edwina, your host from the Ed's Lessons blog, a passionate advocate for play and inquiry, and on a mission to keep children curious and questioning. The days of talk and chalk are over. We're diving into the world of integrated, inquiry and nature-based learning and exploring the strategies that create lifelong learners. So if you're a classroom or homeschool educator or even a curious parent, then this is the place for you. Hello and welcome to another episode of Blooming Curious. I'm going to start off by telling you, or warning you rather, that my voice might not be so great today, as I am really in quite a battle at the moment with family stuff going on. So if this is your first time here and you think, oh my gosh, this woman is so boring, I'm not usually. It's just some stuff that I'm battling with. So you might want to go and listen to other episodes too after this one, just so that you can see what I'm like when I'm actually fabulous. So today we're going to start with your new school year. Many of you are going into a new academic year, or you know what, even tomorrow is a new day. Every day brings a new set of opportunities and a new challenge. And of course, starting of a new year brings all sorts of new opportunities and challenges. I have been talking in the last 2 episodes about how we start planning our classrooms, how we set them up, how we get organized. So if this is your first time setting up a classroom, those 2 episodes might be really, really helpful for you to have a listen to once you've listened to this one. But really, when we start with our children, with our students, I think the first and most important thing to think about is getting to know them, is our relationships with these kids that we're going to be teaching for the next year. So to get to know them, we obviously need to know what's happening in their lives, their families, what they're coming to school with, their schema, and of course what their interests are. Because if we are inquiry teachers and we're teachers who really are interested in getting kids to think, getting kids to be curious, getting kids to question, getting kids to problem solve, then we need to know their interests so that we can tap into that to get them excited about learning. So that's the first part, is get to know your students. I can't stress that enough. And you know that there is data, and I can't remember the exact percentage of what it was. At a recent conference where I was, Trevor McKenzie actually spoke about this, that did you know that when you welcome kids at the door, when you're standing at the door in the morning to welcome them to your classroom, they are more likely to perform better in your classroom and work better than if you do not stand at your classroom door and welcome them. I would say then, if you are struggling, if you already started and you're struggling to connect with your kids, maybe get up from your desk, or even better, don't have a desk. A lot of teachers now don't have desks in their classroom because they find it actually makes them sharper and better at their job. So don't have a desk, or don't be sitting at your desk. Stand at the door in the morning and welcome each child individually into your classroom. And then, of course, you also want to start off in the morning with a math session or a morning circle. Find out what's happening, have something to chat about, because these are the things that build that relationship with your kids. You get to know them, they get to know you, and it goes a heck of a long way. And then for me, it's curiosity, right? Kids, unless they are curious, unless they love learning, we've got a battle on our hands. And if we want children to come to school with a smile on their dial and they are happy and enthusiastic about coming into our classrooms, half our battle is won. But if you've got children who stand at that door and do not want to step over that threshold, that are bawling their eyes out in the mornings, or kids that are just not interested, they're not enthusiastic about learning, we have to get through to them. We have to find a way to get them curious. We've got to find a way to switch them on. Because once they are curious and they love learning, we're done. Then the real learning can actually start. And I have actually created a really great little resource, I think. And I think many people think so too, because it's been downloaded off my website many times. It's called How to Encourage Natural Curiosity in Children. And it's just a simple e-guide that shows you that it's not hard to encourage curiosity in children. It's actually something really easy and very natural. It just means that we ourselves have to be curious too. And we've got to be thinking on our feet in terms of when a kid comes to you, and they are going to come to you when they're on the playground or you're out for a walk, they're going to come to you with a dandelion, with an earthworm, with a snail. What do you do at that moment? Because your words and your facial expressions at that moment are going to make all the difference. If you say yuck, throw that down, it's disgusting, that's it, done, you've lost. You've lost these kids. That's it. You've done nothing to encourage curiosity. So really, your mindset has to change. Your language has to change. You've got to really be curious yourself. And you really need to ask questions. Questions is the basis. Asking questions, rather, is the basis of curiosity. It's the basis of inquiry. It's the basis of getting kids to think. And so I do have a PDF, simple PDF with some simple questions. You know, there are loads of questions online that you can find, pages and pages and pages and pages of all sorts of fabulous questions. These are just simple little questions to keep in mind when you're dealing with kids on an everyday basis. It's things that you can remember, just easy stuff. So you might want to go to the website and download that list of questions. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. Now, we also know that there's all this data, right, about kids losing their curiosity as they go through school. And isn't that just the saddest thing? They come to us very early on because we all are born innately curious. And as they go through school, their curiosity dwindles. So I think it's up to us, especially in early childhood, to keep that flame of curiosity burning really brightly. So I've got loads of blog posts on that. And I'll put links to all of that in the show notes for you to go and have a look and go rummage around and really just read and interact with these things so that you can just start thinking about perhaps how you could better ignite curiosity in children if that's something that you need to do. Because we're always going to have those kids in our class that come there and sit there with those blank stares. We need to spark curiosity in those kids. We need to put a fire under them. So I've got loads of strategies and posts for you on the website that will help you with that. Now, when children come to us, right, with that slug or bug or snail on their hands, what do? You're going to ask questions, as I've just said. I've got some questions for you to download. But I've also got on the website a nice little handy free resource called Backyard Inquiry. And what that does is it just lays out for you, if you want to just do a quick inquiry project on the go, you've now seen what kids are interested in, and this can be something really handy for you to spark that curiosity and take that child's interests further into a project that could actually lead into a whole class project. But certainly it's something that you could use just to do some incidental learning with children. So I'll link that in the show notes for you as well. Now, another great, very popular resource on my website is a little resource that accompanies the little storybook, I Went Walking. And the story is about a child who goes walking and sees all these different things, and there's a lot of repetition of sight words. But one of the things that I've done and that I recommend is, especially now in the beginning when you're starting, is take children on a walk. If you're able to access a natural space near you, a park, or a river bank or any of those things, fabulous. If not, just go on a walk around the school. You can either take an iPad or camera, take photos of everything the kids see, the kids name, or you can pick up objects and bring them back to the classroom. And when they're back in the classroom, you can either print off all these photos or put them on your whiteboard, or if they're objects, you can have all the objects displayed. Objects and photographs are actually all fabulous resources, especially if you print the photos off, because then there's loads of other activities that can follow on from just this one I went walking activity. So I'll leave a link to the I went walking activity resource in the show notes for you. Then we come to integrating what I think is the ultimate strategy, and I've spoken so much about it on the podcast, is inquiry. So many educators I come across are afraid of inquiry because they think it's going to replace direct instruction or explicit instruction, and this is not the case at all. Inquiry dovetails with it. Inquiry is not something you do twice a week or on a Friday afternoon. Inquiry is a mindset. It's ingrained in you. It's ingrained in your students. It's a way of thinking. It's a lens through which you teach. And on my website, I have loads and loads of blog posts that talk about inquiry, how you get started, and other interesting articles on curiosity and inquiry, which I think are all great resources for you to go and have a look as you start your new school year. And it might just be the perfect opportunity for you to start thinking about doing things a little bit differently. So remember, inquiry is not your run-of-the-mill chalk and talk strategy. Children have moved past that. We are now dealing with children who are digital natives. These kids are on iPads and phones, and they know how to navigate their way on a computer. We're up against that. We cannot just be standing there in front of a classroom anymore, just talking or just sticking on a video. And by the way, I also have a podcast and a blog post talking about what research has found about children's brains and how they learn when we throw up a video on the screen as opposed to actually reading a book to them. So that's something else that you might want to consider as you go into the new year, is perhaps not just using technology willy-nilly, but really being very, very intentional about your use of technology, because there's a lot coming out that it's not actually as great as everybody thinks. It has quite a detrimental effect on a growing brain. I'm not talking about older kids. We're talking here about children whose brains are still developing. It's not a great option. So go and listen to some of the previous podcasts. I'll put a link in the show notes, and also go and have a read to some of the posts that I've put up, which shows you the evidence that you can really make some intentional considerations before using technology. So inquiry, why do we do inquiry? Well, we do inquiry. Well, I'm just actually made a mistake there when I've said we do inquiry. We don't do inquiry. Inquiry is part of us, as I've just said. But inquiry is the strategy that gets kids thinking. It's the strategy to teach kids how to use their brains, how to think. It's the strategy for metacognition. In other words, teaching us all how we think, how we learn best. And no matter what the naysayers say, if we are to teach the whole child, inquiry has to be part of that. And I have had another episode where I've spoken intensely about John Hattie's research and where inquiry fits there. So I'll put a link to that as well. And when you really think about it, inquiry is really the only way to go nowadays, because we are going into a new world. It's a new age where information is freely available to all of us. We have to teach kids how to use that information, how to be strategic, how to look for bias. Where do they go look for answers to their questions? What kind of questions get you the best answers? We need to teach them these skills. And so inquiry is the strategy that does that for them. And so I would ask you to go and have a look at the blog posts and the other podcast episodes I have on inquiry. And then, of course, comes the big question. You don't know how to get started. Neither did I. Inquiry is just a strategy that we employ, and it's messy at the beginning. And of course, the big fear for teachers is that you don't have control. And sometimes that's true. You have to relinquish a little bit of control and give it back to the children. And that's what gets them excited too. This does not mean it's a free-for-all. This does not mean kids are all just willy-nilly doing whatever they want. It is a strategic, step-by-step process that you specifically and explicitly teach children. And I have broken down those steps of how to get into inquiry and how to specifically teach kids the process of inquiry in a very handy little e-guide that I've put together called Inquiry 101, which obviously is exactly what it says. It's for those of you who want to just get started, dip your toes in, and I would urge you, if you listen to some of my episodes where I have guest speakers that are also inquiry-based teachers, you will hear the excitement and the passion in their voices. If you want to really inject not just enthusiasm for learning in your students, but also in yourselves and in your approach to your job, because teaching is damn hard. Let's not even fool ourselves. Teaching is a tough job. You have lots of balls to juggle in the air, and it's becoming more and more difficult. So make your job a little bit easier by injecting some fun into it, and the way you do that is through inquiry. I promise you, have a go. It will be the best thing you ever do. Get away from the worksheets, get away from talk and chalk, and start enjoying your job and start getting kids interested in learning so that they can become curious adults who love learning and can become lifelong learners. So I will put a link to Inquiry 101 in the show notes, along with the blog posts for Inquiry 101, and I'd urge you to go and have a look at those. And I'll also put links to the books that I have used to death in my own classroom, that I use to teach myself how to implement inquiry as a strategy in my own classroom. I urge you to rethink the way you do things. We need to change education. We all know that. But we can only change education if we are all brave enough to do things differently. Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, that's exactly right. We cannot be doing the same things over and over and expecting kids suddenly to love learning and become excited. We have to do things differently, and now is the time. Don't wait for tomorrow, next year, next week. Get started now. And so with that, I will love and leave you for today. And I thank you for being here. I thank you for listening to Blooming Curious. It means so much to me. And I'd love you to leave a review if anything I ever say resonates with you or you like the kind of stuff I talk about. Please leave a review. But for today, there's one thing I would really, really urge you to do, and that is to click the share button and share this podcast episode or any other episode you listen to with 2 friends or colleagues that you think will appreciate getting curious. And so I urge you to look at all the links that I'll place in the show notes, follow them, and have a good read and a good listen. And I will see you again next week. And until then, stay blooming curious.